Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here. It is time for our hurricane outlook and discussion. It is Thursday, November 3rd, 2022, and we have a lot to talk about. What's coming next? We have Lisa, we have Martin. Well, we have Martin for a little while longer. It is transitioning into a very large extratropical storm over the North Atlantic. So what happens after that? Well, there's going to be kind of a complex pattern setting up. We'll get to that. And basically the bottom line is the Atlantic stays busy over the next several days here as we continue to move through the first third of November. So let's get on with it. Show what we've got out there. All right, first stop, National Hurricane Center. There's Lisa over parts of Central America, a tropical depression. Here's one of our areas in the near term, the 48-hour. That's only 10% chance of development in non-tropical area. Really not expected to do much. And then we have Martin up here. For a little while longer, it does look like it's going to be transitioned over to what we call post-tropical or the remnants or extratropical, whatever you want to call it. It's just a label, honestly. And then as we expand out to the 5-day version of this map, there we go. There's this next system, 30% chance now of development. I think it's interesting that they mention that environmental conditions could support gradual subtropical, meaning that it's a little bit more spread out, is a simple way to put it, or a more traditional tropical cyclone development, 30% chance of that over the next several days, beginning mainly early next week, while it moves northwest to west over the southwestern Atlantic. So things are certainly staying busy. Here is Martin. I want to show you this real quick. It's transitioning to extratropical, probably already done so. It's just got to show up later this afternoon at the 5 p.m. advisory. Probably be the last advisory from the National Hurricane Center. But remember, these are just labels that we slap on to these different things as mere humans to keep up with what's what. The impacts stay the same, if not get worse, really. This is a massive ocean storm, so any of the shipping interests up there, this is going to create gigantic waves and a very large area of influence, even though it's not a hurricane any longer. That does not matter in terms of the impacts that it will have. Remember Sandy? Of course you do. Back in 2012, same kind of situation. It didn't really matter what we called it. It became sort of post-tropical Sandy as it made landfall, but it had a lot of impacts, of course, for New Jersey and New York and elsewhere along the Atlantic seaboard. Maybe these are just labels. All right. Speaking of labels, there's tropical depression, Lisa, down over Central America, and we can zoom in here and take a look at Lisa closer. And yeah, it's still producing some heavier rains. This band coming in here to parts of the Yucatan. There's the low-level center. Still pretty vigorous overall, and it's going to get out over that Bay of Campeche there, and pretty good upper-level outflow still. The dry air could limit development, but if it becomes, if I can talk, I just need to slow down sometimes. If it can become a tropical storm again, hey, that won't shock me at all as it moves on into the Bay of Campeche there. All right. This is what it looks like on the track map. If it's going to do so, it would do so right through here, shown as a depression over the next few days. But don't be surprised if for a brief period it gets re-upgraded. Again, just a label, it's what we call it, to a tropical storm. I guess labels matter, and it's good. We keep up with what's what out there. But the impacts overall don't change too much, even though we label things different names, whatever. All right, so the vorticity signature, there's case in point. Look how large the influence of Martin is over the North Atlantic, a giant area of energy and wind and squally weather and enormous waves. There's that little impulse east and southeast of Bermuda there. Not really going to do much, it looks like. Not much through here yet, but just give it time. And then there's the vorticity signature associated with Lisa over parts of Central America. Now, the water temperatures certainly favor some development through here of the tropical or subtropical nature. And just a real quick explanation, I guess, of what that means. Subtropical, more spread out, the wind field a little bit larger, not as concentrated. That's an easy way to understand it. Tropical is more bundled, more concentrated. The winds are focused nearer to the center. And again, labels, just labels here. The effects, though, not very much different between whatever we label these things, but the water temperature certainly could support something to develop in that area after we're done tracking Martin, which probably will be within the next couple of hours. I think the last advisory technically the last advisory will be written, even though, of course, Martin's going to continue on out into the North Atlantic. This next feature is going to be very interesting to watch as it evolves over the coming days. Now, a lot of people have asked, hey, is this part of this overall pattern part of an active Madden-Julian oscillation? And the answer is no. It's over here in phases 6 and 7 right now, which favors the West Pacific, and it is forecast by the models, the ensembles, etc., to move back into the null phase, briefly dipping just a little bit into phase 8, which does kind of give a little bit of enhancement to parts of the Western Hemisphere, but not very much at all. This is the Euro, this is the JMA. Both of them are very similar. This has just the tiniest, at least the ensemble mean here. Some of the members a little bit more amplified, but basically the Madden-Julian oscillation dives back into the null phase, as we call it. The circle there, meaning there's no discernible MJO activity. But no, we are not in a favorable MJO phase. The biggest reason behind what we're seeing, believe it or not, is from a huge push of cold air. Eric Webb picked up on this, and a couple of other people as well a few days ago. A massive area late in the season cold surge working its way from south to north. I know that's counterintuitive, crossing the equator from South America and making its way into the Atlantic, and that cold air is dense. It helps to slow the trades. You get convergence of air, and the air piles up. It kind of creates its own little bit of a wave, or convectively coupled Kelvin wave. It's complicated, but that's kind of what's driving this, a regional setup of favorability that helped to give us Lisa to some extent, and is going to help to drive a lot of energy over the next few days in the Caribbean, eventually working its way up into the Southwest Atlantic. So, lots to show you here. I'm going to show you 3 different model runs, GFS, Canadian, and Euro. Here is the GFS over the next few days. First of all, point your attention to this area over here. That is Lisa. Yeah, there's a little bit of a chance there in the Southwest Bay of Campeche that it gets reclassified or re-upgraded, whatever you want to call it, to a tropical storm. That won't shock me at all. Then, watch what starts happening down here. A lot of energy starts to bundle together as this cold surge works its way off of South America from south to north. Yep, that's how it works. And then look what happens. We get this big turning, this gyre of energy out over the Caribbean, different pieces of vorticity, lots of it streaming all up through here. Clearly you can see that. The question is, how much does all of this bundle together, if at all? Does it stay large and spread out, a big sprawling, rainy, kind of squally system? All the cruise ships that are going to be going through there the next several days, and I know there's a lot of them coming out of Canaveral, coming out of Miami, the different ports down there from the different areas in the Bahamas to Labadee, all the way down to San Juan, the Virgin Islands, elsewhere. Not the best time, unfortunately, with this big sprawling system out there. And that's what I mean. These things do have impacts, even though it might not be, oh, the next named storm, which I think is actually Nicole. Maybe this doesn't become Nicole, but who cares? It's going to be disruptive overall. So this is 78 hours. Move this on out to day 5 here, and you see what happens. There's a large area of energy on the north side, a more concentrated area of energy in the vicinity of the northwest Bahamas near the Florida Straits right there. Does this organize enough, and water temperatures are definitely warm enough down there? That's not going to be an inhibitor. It's going to be the dry air, the upper level winds, and just the overall structure. A complicated pattern setting up for sure. We got to watch this closely, and I'll explain more as to why as we move forward. Now let's look at the Canadian. Another global model. This is the Canadian, also out to day 5, 120 hours. A very similar evolution, just a little bit slower. More energy focusing up here south and east of the Carolinas. There's our other piece of energy down here near Cuba. A massive gyre of energy in the Canadian model as well. And then finally the Euro. This is every 24 hours, and you can see a very similar evolution. There's 48, 72, 96, and finally 120. All of this to me says there's a lot of energy out there. Does it bundle up? Does it become focused? Does it stay spread out? Hey, I don't know the answer, but there are some clues that we can look at here. Let's broaden the Euro out to the whole North Atlantic. And let's see. I want to look at here where we can look at the sea level pressure. There we go. So one of the clues to this, see that big old high right there, 1043 millibars, that's at the surface. There's 1009 surface low, and this is your squeeze play. I've talked about this before. That is the gradient, the difference in pressure over distance here, and that's going to be fairly substantial. All right, so 43 minus 10 would be 33 plus one more because it's only 9, so I tell my kids. So it's 34 millibar difference over quite a good distance, but it's enough that your stiff northeast winds are going to be blowing through here, doing what? Everybody, play with me at home, piling up the water here. Trying to get a better color, but it is going to pile up the water there along the mid-Atlantic and southeast coast of the U.S. This is the Euro at day 5. Yeah, that's pretty problematic there. The Euro showing 34 knot winds or higher. That could cause some beach erosion, coastal flooding for areas like Charleston, maybe the Outer Banks of North Carolina. I talked about this yesterday, maybe even the northeast part of Florida. On the east side, not to worry about this on the southwest coast where you're still dealing with the aftermath of Ian. At least we don't have to be concerned with this just yet. Hopefully nothing gets into the Gulf and does any mischief there. But a very complicated pattern, to be sure, over the next several days. And just to kind of illustrate my point, I'm concerned about all of this area through here, mainly from Daytona north, as this sits out here, these stiff northeast winds blowing across the area. We call that a fetch. More than a couple of days, it looks like, and you know that can pile the water up there very efficiently, and especially up here along the Outer Banks. We have Rodanthe down here, a very vulnerable area to big waves. I think that we're looking at high surf advisories coming, maybe the risk of coastal flooding, and as I mentioned yesterday, full moon coming up. The king tides are basically your perigean spring tide, a extra high tide, all of that factoring in with this system. It was almost exactly a year ago that we had a coastal storm very similar to this, and we had also one in 2019 around this same time as well. Something about the first part of November, the southwest Atlantic over here, seems to get these hybrid, annoying but impactful systems, and that looks to be the case here as we move through the next several days. So that's your what's next. Bottom line, Atlantic's going to stay busy one way or the other. All right, that is it from me for today. As always, thank you for tuning in. Please don't forget, if you're stopping by and you're just watching, subscribe to the channel. All you got to do is hit subscribe and the notification bell, because you got to be alerted when I upload one of these videos. At least I hope you'd want to. And then, you know, we live in an algorithm world. Probably should get that on a t-shirt. That would be pretty popular. But the like button apparently matters. It really does. So if you could hit that like button and get the YouTube algorithms to perk up and notice what we're doing, you could do me a big solid there. And it spreads the word, and more people can learn from what we're doing here with our little project. All right? All right. Have a great rest of your Thursday. As always, thanks for tuning in. I do appreciate it. I'm Mark Sudduth. I'll be back with more for you tomorrow.